So Donald Trump has caused outrage amongst Western nations after claiming that NATO troops avoided the front lines in Afghanistan.
I've always said, will they be there if we ever needed them? And that's really the ultimate test. And I'm not sure of that. I know that we would have been there, or we would be there. But will they be there? And let's hope that that never happens. We've never needed them. We have never really asked anything of them. You know, they'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan or this or that. And they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines.
Well, we're joined now by Conservative MP and former Army officer who served in Afghanistan, Ben Obese-Jecty. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us today. What is your reaction to Donald Trump's comments?
Disappointment more than anything else. Disappointment and sadness. I'm a veteran of Afghanistan. I served there during Operation Herrick 11, which was 2009-10 in Sangin. I was part of Three Rifles Battle Group, and we took very, very heavy casualties, the heaviest casualties of any British battle group since the Korean War. And Sangin was the area where a third of all British soldiers, the 457 who lost their lives in Afghanistan, were lost. And when we handed over, ultimately, as a nation to the US Marines, they too took heavy casualties in Sangin. So to suggest that we we're a little off the front lines and that we didn't do our fair share of the work in Afghanistan is outrageous. And I think it also insults our NATO partners as well. The Danes particularly took a very high rate of casualties per capita, higher in fact even than us, I think second only to the US. So I think to suggest that NATO allies did not do their fair share in Afghanistan when it was the US that invoked Article 5 is something of a disservice.
Ben, morning to you, it's Kamali here. I wonder if, I don't want you to psychoanalyse what Donald Trump's thinking in his mind, because that's a very difficult task, I am sure. But where do you think he's getting this from? I mean, it's flat wrong, it's disrespectful. What do you think's going on?
More than anything, with Donald Trump, he will say things for effect, and I think this comes off the back of the discussions around Greenland. Potentially, this is a way of lashing out. And you're right. I couldn't possibly hope to second guess what the president's thinking or why he goes down these routes. But potentially, I think this is said more for effect than anything else, and I don't think potentially the outrage that it causes is something that concerns him.
Just to continue on that theme a little bit further, I mean, do you think this is part of the narrative that he's talking about at the moment, that the US does all the heavy lifting within NATO, that it's the US that bears the burden when it comes to NATO?
There's a real issue around NATO and around the level of military spending that we're seeing at the moment. He has been right in the past. We do need to spend more money on defence, particularly here in the UK. We've seen recently that the Defence Investment Plan was due before Christmas. It's now been pushed out potentially to the spring or beyond. So there are real concerns around the amount that we're spending on our military spending here in the UK and across NATO in total. But for my own personal experience, I have 2 US Air Force bases here in my constituency, and those US personnel don't live on base. They live out in the villages and towns around us, and I know that they don't share the views of the president when it comes to working with British forces living in this country. So I think that we shouldn't look too closely at the relationship between ourselves and the US military, but this is potentially just a passing phase.
Potentially a passing phase. I'm glad you brought us on to how the US forces may well feel now. What do you think about going forward, though? Because what does this do to that sort of sense of morale, that sense of camaraderie within the two armed forces, us and the United States, that sense that perhaps at some point the person at the top may not have the back of their ally?
It's very, very difficult. I think that, you know, our 2 forces in particular within NATO, the US and the UK, are absolutely intertwined in the way that we work hand in glove on a day-to-day basis. Intelligence sharing, we have senior officers embedded in each other's armies, commanding rather large military formations. So there will always be that integral link between us, and that is very much where the special relationship absolutely thrives. I think that the knowledge that the current US administration is perhaps a little bit more laissez-faire with its approach to how it treats its partners and its allies, as we've seen in recent weeks, is something of a concern, and it's something that we will have to bear in mind going forwards. But I think every decision that we take now could have longer-term ramifications, and so it's very pleasing to see that we are prepared to take a robust stance with the US with regards to an issue like Greenland, but at the same time we need to bear in mind that we need to work with the US to achieve the best security situation that we can for the country.
And just going back to your response to Donald Trump's comments, those comments that NATO troops stayed a little off the front lines in Afghanistan, you said you were disappointed and sad. So I wondered if you would like to describe the sacrifice that you witnessed British troops making in Afghanistan.
Three Rifles Battle Group, which I was a part of during Operation Herrick 11, was based in Sangin with ground holding battle group. And the ground holding battle groups effectively took some of the heaviest casualties. And over the course of that tour, we have sustained around 20% casualties. I believe around 30 soldiers were lost and 170 wounded. And some of those wounds are wounds that will live with those soldiers for their entire lives. Amputations, lost limbs, not to mention the mental scars that we don't see day to day. And whilst we all remember the coffins being brought back through Bryce Norton draped in Union Jacks, that memory has faded for a lot of people. It was now 16 years ago, and so I think we need to bear in mind that there are still soldiers living amongst the general population who live with these wounds, both physical and mental, who still need our support and need our respect more than anything else. And I think we shouldn't forget the sacrifice made by the British soldiers in Afghanistan during that period. The scenes that we're seeing on the screen at the moment very much bring back a lot of memories, and I think it's important that we never lose sight of that, and we never forget the sacrifice that they made. And for us as politicians, it's incredibly important that we understand the recent commitment to potentially put troops on the ground in Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire. We need to bear in mind that we will be putting troops in harm's way, and we should not take those decisions lightly.
All right, Ben Obese-Jecty, appreciate you joining us this morning and for your reflections. Thank you very much for that. As we were showing those pictures there from Wootton Bassett, as Ben was reflecting on, many people will perhaps have forgotten those scenes that we used to have to see regularly in this country, those coffins coming back draped in the Union flag. And I got the sense that Mr Obese-Jecty was choosing his words carefully. As a politician now, of course, not an army officer. I do wonder what the feeling is within the armed forces right now. I'm sure there's some choice words being said by some members of the army right now, considering what they've heard from the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Of course, all the Air Force fought, the Navy fought as well, the armed forces all there in Afghanistan, all being disparaged for their role in going to the aid of the United States after the Article 5 was triggered, the only time in history it's been triggered, and the US got the aid of its allies. Donald Trump doesn't think that actually happened.